Strata Unscripted is back. Hi, Katharine.
Good afternoon.
And this one has an interesting and dark twist to it. Tell me what we're talking about today.
Yes, I gave you some homework over the weekend, and that was to watch the Carl Urban version of Dredd. Not because, to be clear, too, I was telling Thomas I could never watch. I was telling you I could never watch that movie again because I had really fantastic nightmares for weeks and weeks afterwards. It's really dark. It's not like a chipper movie, but it's more so I wanted you to look at it through the lens of Mega City 1 and specifically Peach Trees is a strata. And when right now in the news, we're looking at Grand Central and now another second building, Corries in Surrey, are going through the BC Supreme Court where different factions are fighting over control of the budget and the management contract for those particular buildings. And in one case, it's like a 600 plus unit building, but in this newest one, it's 180 units. So this kind of unrest and mutiny can happen in any size of strata. Actually, there's another one that I didn't post. As there's a triplex actually recently gone through the BC Supreme Court where they have just been assigned an administrator in the last couple of years because they also can't get along and they're not. Yeah. So it just, to me, when you look at Grand Central, Decoris, Peach Trees, that's a sequence to me. And yeah, maybe the last jump is a little bit of a stretch, but like to me, it's not so much fictional as future predictive if we continue the way that we're going.
Very
So
post-apocalyptic. And what does that say about the way that these communities are operated?
yeah, what does it say? I mean, what does your data tell us about how buildings are operating for future foresight, planning, long term projects, maintaining their buildings, taking care of their governance? What is your reporting showing us right now? Is this
They
even
do what
that
they're
far off?
legislatively required to do. So if you're required to properly and adequately save for your reserve funds, you do. If you're not required to, you don't. You meet your minimum legislative hurdle and maybe exceed it moderately, and that's it. Um, I would say that very few buildings are at war with themselves, um, because ultimately that's what happens when you have competing councils. And I guess you end up in this situation because there has been a meeting improperly called or held, and then results get contested. And I think there's been varying conclusions on the cases that I'm familiar with about which council has authority and what will happen now that it's under the control of an administrator to ensure that the next meeting is properly called, responsibly held, um, scrupulously monitored and tracked so that the results can be relied upon.
Personally, I'm not quite sure how it got to that point. Um, as a brokerage managed strata, to me that seems it's interesting. It goes to show that when we look at the lack of experience and the attrition rates and the constant looming retirement of strata licensees, this begs the case of what are those licensees like? What are they even capable of taking on this challenge at this point? Because I was looking through a lot of the regulator information to prepare for this episode, and I wanted to see more. I wanted to see that the regulators and the BC provincial government are not just seeing that this is an important issue, but they're doing something to help support those who are adjacent to it. And so I was disappointed when I was looking through the BCFSA information. What they've done recently for strata corporations is they've added a new stock clause to their knowledge library, and it's basically called the non-conforming strata clause, where realtors can stick that into the contract of sale saying, like, yeah, we what does it say? It may not be operating in compliance with the Strata Property Act. You should seek legal advice.
Right.
So it's literally taking the accountability and the oversight away from those that are educated and who should be able to know and do better, and it's pushing that onto the consumers. um, I have so many problems with this because to me, if the regulators are pushing less transparency and compliance and they're pushing accountability onto the consumers, and there are all sorts of political pushes to deregulate the building of homes and development charges and amenity cost charges and things like that. I'm worried that we are fast forwarding ourselves as a society living in dense housing towards peach trees, where we're creating higher volume, not as well built to standard buildings, very dense, very fast, and we are not helping the people who are going to live in them set themselves up to succeed in future. Like we're just doing, here's a building, and then not thinking about, okay, how is it going to be lived in? And to me, that little jump there is, that's, we can't just skip that step. So
I think that part's really important. I guess where I differ in view is that, the really big, really dense ones, I think are built to be professionally managed. And I think that they're built for that purpose. And generally, a couple of case studies aside, they're managing to operate as a strata should. They are conforming. They might have a lack of harmony in some cases. They may have conflict between competing boards in the most extreme, but at least they are conforming. It's the wave of potential multiplexes that we've heard a lot about over the last few years, which in British Columbia and no other Western region get classified as stratas, where we have this new non-conforming status being slapped onto those that are legally supposed to
can
be
I
stratas
ask
but
you,
aren't.
how do they have it so that it's structured in other areas of the country then? What is
Yeah,
a fourplex or a sixplex? How do they figure out how to do the roof? Like who signs the contract? Who pays the check, the 1 point whatever $1 million check or whatever it is, if it's a big enough expenditure, who's putting that on their credit card and then who's paying the interest for the credit card? Like these are all the questions where when builders are like, oh, we just want to be hands off and let people do it with like no strata
Mhm.
fees and no regulations. I'm like, yeah, but that's because you are not paying your own bills in your household and you're not figuring out the logistics, so you're not worrying about it. I bet you at home, a lot of those builders have wives that run their households, and that's why they're not thinking about what this might look like 20 years from now when they've
Well,
given these people no structure. So,
you've seen them and taken the photographs of the duplex where one side
yep,
has a new roof and one side doesn't. I'm
yep,
one of those rare examples. I live in a non-strata row house. I did my
yep.
roof. Nobody else did their roof. I did my windows. Nobody else did their windows. My neighbor to one side did his roof 8 years ago. Neighbor to the other side, it's 40 years old. So, it's
Yeah.
that
And when
works
the
for
leaks start
most
coming in
humans.
and migrating onto your sides of that home, what are you going to do about it?
I'm gonna call him and
Yeah. And when he doesn't care,
like
what are
I'm
you going to
doing.
do?
I'll
Or
have
when
my
your
stuff
other, you've
fixed.
also talked about how your other neighbor does all the landscaping, and when she moves or retires or just gets too old to do it, what are you guys going to do? Like a lot
It's
of
not like
the
it's hard,
we're
like, it's the
good
same thing as if you had a
plans.
council, it's just there's somebody that's on the landscaping committee and runs it, like, I don't need a trust bank account to file annual returns, to have all of the legislative bureaucracy of a strata, to live in my house and pay for what I need when I need it, like, I just don't.
You
So,
don't, but that's because you're also like more capable than most will be, and you're more educated on this specific topic. Like us in the industry who deal with strata, we like to act like, oh, it's so easy. But you can't go into strata as a professional saying, oh, strata is so easy, because for most people, they just don't have the education background or the professional experience in adjacent fields that we might,
it's
right?
true, and I mean, it is different. Most regions, to answer the starting question, they just have party wall agreements. So it's
Okay.
just a legal contract. There are certain covenants that you're responsible for. If there is a leak, you say you're going to fix yours. Like
So
will have it investigated.
it's
It's just a,
legislation, but it's privatized legislation instead of public governance legislation. Like to me, it's the same why, it's just a different method. And instead of being created by a governing body that's supposed to have the best interest of the entire consumer and public creating the rules, aka the Strata Property Act, you have developers who are looking out for themselves and their profit margins at the beginning of that domicile's lifetime and birth, creating the contracts for those people as relationships to each other for perpetuity. And when you look at duplexes, that's a single relationship, one party versus the other. But when you have even a fourplex, now you have 6 relationships. And then if you go to a sixplex, it's like 15 or whatever relationships. So the higher up you get, you can't just look at units, you have to look at crossovers of potential people bumping each
And
other.
that's why I think Strata is great for those that are bigger, say 5 or more units, or more than 5 units, and why something else should take effect when it's smaller.
Sure, but
Because
you know what? It doesn't. It's no less work because, like, again, there's a
it's way
triplex right
less
now
work.
that's under court order administrator. Like, all of my self managed clients are basically little guys who don't know what they're doing, how to get along, how to maintain their
Right.
buildings, and they need help. And
But
when I show
hey,
them the process, they're like, wow, this is okay. We get it now. We just needed someone to show us because this actually makes sense, but no one's explained it this way before.
so you see, it's no more work. It's way more work. Like what I don't have to do because I'm not technically a strata is maintain separate accounts, contribute to a reserve fund, have a depreciation report prepared. There are
Which you
6
don't need
units
for
in the
4
strata.
units or less. 4 units or
6.
less, no DR stuff. No, no, no.
6. I am
Yeah, but we're
6.
talking about fourplexes, then you can't put the DR thing on that list.
Well, if you're talking about less than 5, then you're off. That's why I said that the number might be 5. I still prefer not being in that bucket, but the bigger you are, the more complex it becomes. But it's just another layer of bureaucracy. Now I have to have AGMs. I have to meet with my neighbors. Like
Yes,
some of
you
my
have
neighbors I
to
love.
talk to your neighbors formally and write it down so that future owners can know what y'all decided together. Oh
So
my
you've got
God.
4, and now you don't have any majority, and you can't get your 3/4 majority.
Why not?
What do you
You guys
do
don't get
if you're?
along?
Yeah, let's just say it's 2v2. What do you do?
Yeah, but so then how could they properly maintain their property if it was 2v2 anyways? At least if they follow the Strata
They
Property
do
Act,
their
not
own. I did
some
my own
party
roof. The other neighbor
laundry.
did their own roof. The other 2
But then
didn't do their
again,
roof.
when the leaks come through, like it works when things are good and when people have
Mhm.
enough money to buffer themselves. But the minute that those conditions go away, party wall agreements and everyone being individual don't work anymore. Like
They're good enough for
we're
Australia, the
designed to
US,
be, they're
most of
not.
Canada, and the UK. Like, how does it work everywhere and not here? Is BC that special?
No,
I
I,
don't think it is. It's just it's complicated. I certainly see the challenges with trying to operate that at greater scale, but I feel very strongly that strata is unnecessary. You got to prepare a Form B every time. Well, it's not like it's going to be that common if there's only 2, 3, or 4 of you in a community, but somebody doesn't want to sign off on it because the 2 neighbors are warring. How do you get your Form B?
so if the strata doesn't matter, then you know what you just do? You put that clause on your sale and call it a day. So if they were really so
Yeah,
anti-strata, they can go about continuing to be anti-strata,
right,
right? Like if you want to not do
right.
it, you can do it. It just doesn't make you better or more compliant.
Yeah, I'm not claiming that it's better. I just think that
It's just because someone's
it's
telling you to do something, so now you don't want to do
waiting.
it.
I mean, but it is extra cost and work. Like you gotta
For who?
you have to have an annual meeting, you have to have
Yeah.
minutes, you gotta record them. Somebody's responsible for
Okay,
that. There
so
needs to be a
let's say
bank
you
account,
bought
there
a
needs to be a
building and
reserve
none of that
fund.
was done, and it turns out that there was like
Mhm.
mold in the attic and like half of the roof was done and not the other, and no one's told you about it. And you bought it now overvalued, and you got your inspector to check it, but they're only a home inspector. They're not a mind reader. They can't go back through and see through things and go back through governance history. Who are you now going to extract back the value that you're owed? AKA, who are you going to sue now if there's no rules and no divisions and no requirement
My inspector, if
for
they
transparency?
didn't actually inspect it, and it's my loss if I had an inspector and we did the work and I chose to buy it anyway. That's the way the world works
So
for,
just don't be on the be and
most.
taken side is the answer. That's so simple to me.
That's
See? We're back at peach trees when we only look out for ourselves and our own faction and not even a modicum of like higher level. It breaks down, not right now per se, but the problem is that where a few of us do it, especially those with power, it makes it okay for everyone else to start doing it, and then the drift happens. So then all of a sudden we're all acting that way, trying to get ahead a little bit, and then pretty soon you got council members who are doing repairs for only their units, but then refusing to do other ones for other units. Or you have two factions fighting over control of giant 600 plus unit stratas and multi-million dollar budgets because it's what is best for them rather than what's best for
Yeah, I
us.
mean, look, the world works the way the
What
world
world
works.
do you
There are
want to
plenty
live
of
in,
cozy
though?
relationships between well, you're telling me that the holy ground might be a nice strata where everybody gets along, but you look at strata management and the buildings that ended up in the situation of competing councils were both managed.
Hmm.
So how did a meeting get
We
called
need
that
more
wasn't valid,
education
and
for our
how did that
licensees and our brokerages too, for sure. I've been
and
pushing
even
that.
those that are super smooth, the owners are not really aware of the cozy relationships between vendors and management
Yeah, there
firms.
should be
And
more
what does
transparency
that
on that
mean?
too. And I think that that's coming
I think
out
so.
more and more. If you look through the Facebook threads and things like that, and the groups of owners, strata owners in BC, they're wising up on that stuff. They see patterns of which brokerages
Yeah.
work with which vendors, and they have benchmark reports where they can look at their budgets in comparison with others in the area and see that their management fee or their landscaping fee is 80% higher than five or six other very comparable. I'm not talking direct comparisons, but when you can look at an area and see comparisons wildly off of percentages, that's something to look at. And I mean, something to ask
It
questions.
is.
So,
I'm passionate about that sort of thing. But you know, let's come back to Peachtree and this world of potential conflict. How do you climb down from that? The judge has appointed an
yeah.
administrator. Where do we go from here? And how does that community go back to a place of operating with at least some harmony?
You're not going to like the answer, but everybody individually got to look inside themselves and think, what can I do to fix this? Because there's way too many people, and you even see it in the news, like big institutions out there pointing, you need to do better, and then this problem will go away. That's not going to work. You need to say, okay, look, I got to own this. Like infringed upon the bylaws here. I'm going to write a letter back to the council and apologize and hope that they will waive the bylaw fines, or I'm going to participate more respectfully in the next AGM conversation. But I also, as reciprocally, want my council to be transparent, right? So, like, I think council members need to think about how they can fix problems instead of covering for past mistakes. And the ownership themselves needs to own how they also facilitated that culture that let it get to that place. Looking backwards forever. So Peach Trees is already at this place where they got Judge Dredd and the gangs and factions shooting up, structural walls everywhere being shot up in that place. Like, oh my God, the insurance for that building would be wild. I don't want to know what their deductibles are. You probably could not get tenants insurance in that building. No, absolutely not. Wild. But they need to figure out like how they fix it from that point forward, not look backwards. Look, we're here, it's not great. Can we at the next AGM increase the budget lines on these areas so that we can start to plan for future? Or hey, we know that like not everyone is in favor of this particular project, so as part of our process we're going to make sure that we tender out to at least 3 to 5 bidders to be sure that it is transparently scoped and priced, etc. So they could do things to make trust build again. But if everyone just like stood around at the AGM and like points at each other and yells backwards instead of being like, look, we weren't seeing each other. I'm sorry things got to this place. We can understand that we were upset or frustrated with whatever it was, but moving forward, can we agree we're not going to do that? That's all it has to be, you know?
Good solution, good outcome for those large buildings. Let's go back to the multiplexes. So you've got developers slapping these things together. Their interest is earning their economic return. The people that are moving in want somewhere that meets their lifestyle. These developers are being told by some realtors, hey, don't make a strata. Nobody wants strata fees. Let me sell it as
And there's
non-conforming.
marketing
Is
firms
that
out
fair?
there that even advertised it that way. Like there's a few out there. It is a common messaging. It's even on the BCFSA's website now as a clause to insert into sales contracts. So yeah, that is fair. That
Right.
sentiment exists and that narrative exists. I've heard it at so many conferences and webinar sessions and things, just in informal chatter as well. So yes, that's a common narrative that exists.
Right.
I don't know how to walk it back, to be honest, because it's hard for me to say like, look, I want you to do it this way because I want to fill that need as a service. So like it's selfish in a way. I want that business. That's the role that I'd like to perform, is being that self-managed strata guidance advisor, and or multiplex startup governance advisor. And if they see it as no, it's not necessarily adds fees and people don't understand strata, so adding more strata fees will just make it more of a, like it'll just be a deterrent to sales essentially.
Well, I mean, it is a deterrent. It's a mathematical deterrent because when they go to their bank to get their mortgage, they have to put that in as one of the line items that determines how much they can qualify for. You don't have any less maintenance if you own it and pay for your own maintenance. Bank will penalize you if you have a strata fee in there. So this is really a story of incentives and outcomes. And we both know that the amount of maintenance you need to do on a newer building is less than the maintenance you need to do on a building that's 25, 30,
Well, only
40
if you
years old.
haven't read the warranty small print.
Yeah, I get that. But your new roof is less likely to leak than a 25-year-old roof.
That is so
And
not true. I would actually
it,
disagree based on the
well,
standards of the
yeah,
work these
yeah,
days.
maybe.
And if
Fair.
you legitimately read, like, say, the manufacturer's warranty,
Yeah,
Suprema, or whoever it is,
yeah,
their membrane warranty will say that the strata is obligated, or the
yeah.
owner is obligated to, at minimum, visually inspect the roof twice annually and perform maintenance and or cleaning or whatever once annually. So if on year 1 and 2 you didn't do that, and then in year 5 you noticed buckling and stuff like that, guess how much of your warranty you get to keep? This much.
Yeah.
0.
And that's fair. And I shouldn't have used that as my example. But
Oh
newer
yeah, I was gonna be all over that.
lasts
Come on
25
now,
years.
like you tried
So
that.
I know. It's not like we haven't had Kim and others from roofing companies tell
Yeah,
us we got
exactly.
it, we got it. But a newer thing takes less maintenance than an older one,
No, I
and that's
disagree again. They were built to better quality 30 years ago than they are being built right now.
yeah. All right. Well, I'll let the new owner and the 30-year-old building owner compare their annual outlays on mandatory maintenance and see what
I would
they
rather
because
be in
they're super
a
different.
under-maintained 30-year-old building than an under-maintained 10-year-old building.
But that doesn't change how a bank will qualify you. And just
Right now.
mathematically, I understand why a realtor would say don't, because if you've got a realm of 100 potential buyers for this home and you have a strata fee versus you don't have a strata fee, you're going to lose 30 of those potential 100 buyers who no longer will qualify.
See, to me, if I was that 100 buyers and I'm like, they're all the same style of housing, and they all have strata plans, but only one of them is doing the strata governance. My brain would not be like, oh, that's the worst one. I'd be like, wow, they're the ones doing it right. You know,
Yeah,
so like that's the part to me that's like wild, is we see
it's true.
governance
It's
as
more proactive.
liability instead
Mhm.
of, you know, something that actually covers you on risk.
True.
Like, because every non-conforming strata is literally just the owner's accepting risk and liability for what's going on. And if you can't get insurance because you guys aren't doing your maintenance and planning, like what happens then, right? Like
But
it's
there's
okay
another
here in year
good
one,
reason
but year
to not
15,
have
year
strata
20.
on a duplex, right? Like if you have
Duplexes are different. I
non-strata,
get it because there's one direct relationship, right? Like there's
right?
only one to one. And I still think it can have problems, but as soon as you increase the number of interpersonal relationships, 4
Strata
units is
insurance
6
is more
relationships.
expensive than house insurance and typically carries higher deductibles than single
Well,
owner
that's because the more
policies.
people that go together, the higher risk there is.
Oh, I get that, but there's also a premium if you had that duplex and you had them both with a party wall agreement versus you had them as a strata. Um,
But that's only
that's
because you're individually taking on the cost. So, like, if anything happened, you're not going to have coverage anyways as a party wall agreement. Usually, you're just going to have to pay it yourself. So, like, you're not really like taking like you're paying less upfront to get less coverage, right? So, like to me, again, the incentives and the trade-offs, you have to look at it, not you can't look at the benefits without looking at the drawbacks of each of those parts of the agreement that you're looking at, right? So who does it benefit to have a party wall agreement where it comes to insurance? Well, more so the insurer probably, because they can defer it to the homeowners individually. Versus with a strata, it makes the insurer be responsible under the law for things to protect that group of people.
It's true.
That's.
But my brain keeps saying that all of the incentives encourage developers, encourage realtors, and even encourage those 30 of 100 home buyers that couldn't get in unless they bought the non-conforming one to go for that structure. What is it that we need to change in terms of incentives, or
I
is it
like
a
some of the
matter?
incentives, like deferred DCs and amenity costs and things like that. But I like it better where that is transparently shown on the purchase contracts and the subsidies are done at the end. Like you could have
Hmm,
some deferrals for things, but there's no reimbursements done until the sale and maybe even directly to the homeowner through grants. Like I
hmm,
think that
interesting.
more so there's a lack of transparency being the problem. Like, so I actually think it's great. Let's get the builders building, but let's get them building something quality and not just fast and cheap and with so little design because you are just concerned with building the tallest tower in the sandbox. Like, that is not what we need to build. People don't like living that way. Nobody at
I'm
Peach Trees is
familiar
very happy.
with Catherine's Venn diagram, but what are the things for those that aren't familiar with your Venn diagram that you can have but not have all of?
Oh, speed, price, quality. You get 2 out of 3, right? So if you're doing it fast and cheap, it's not gonna be good, right? So,
So
like,
which one are you wanting them to drop for it to be quality?
I think speed, because to be honest, it doesn't need to be fast right now. We've already got a way huge overstock. So go slower and be more choosy. And we got like tens of thousands of empty units that are already not being sold. So great, let's sit on that for a while. And yeah, maybe you guys planned a little poorly and maybe you shouldn't have all tried to build all the same product all at once and then manipulate the market to like force people to buy that bad product. Instead, why don't you slow down and be a little more intentional and not just like rush to get, all the market capture? Like, what happened to some diversity? Like, let's have some
Yeah, I mean,
diversity of housing.
it's very clear in Vancouver and Toronto, especially, that the shoebox apartments are not in favor. They don't fit that many people's lives, not for any length of time. And while they were considered very investor friendly when they could be flipped on completion, now that the market is softer, price expectations haven't dropped enough for buyers to be lapping those up. And so now we've got an excess supply in that segment, but and I think you would agree, a lack of quality product for those that need 2, 3 bedroom accommodation
Yeah.
at an affordable price, right? Like, sure, there's some supply that's been built that's that, but it's priced way beyond where many working families could afford them.
Yeah, and I've lived in those shoe boxes, to be clear, for my whole life, as a single parent, even. Tiny little, what they call a junior one bed, or even a one bed and den. and they
Hmm.
have no interior, like it's all interior windows in the bedrooms, and I'm like, that's a studio and den at best, guys. But they'll
Right.
say whatever they want you to hear to get that price. They're not the ones that are listening to the bus hydraulics of the number 14 at 90 decibels at 6:30 every morning in the summer, because it's either that or keep the windows shut and boil to death. And
Right.
then if you keep the windows open, you get to hear the hydraulics. And you know what else? You get to have this lovely layer of exhaust grime dust every summer on your blinds that you have to soak off, and you're probably breathing in too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
That
I
is the
lived in
housing
London.
we're
I took a
creating
tube.
for
I
our next generation.
felt that fume. I
Like,
lived
is
in
this
500
what we
square feet as
want?
well.
Like, I know I'm annoying. I know my perspective comes across anti-developer in some ways, but I'm not. I want housing. It's just I want good housing to be built that I want my friends and family and colleagues and newcomers to Canada to be joyful living in, not feel like they're coming here into a rat race of tiny apartment cages. Like, that is not the vibe. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, clearly we've got a lot of that supply at the moment, so it needs to or will be eventually absorbed because the holding costs will eventually stack up.
and in the
I do
meantime, let's
think,
build it slower and more
yeah,
thoughtfully.
that makes a huge amount of sense, and I
Of
think
course
that
it
that's
does.
something that many people will go for. You were recently featured on a video talking about some of these earlier developments. I don't know how much you'd like to say about that, but I think it's interesting.
The REW?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? That was a really fun experience. It was REW Magazine and Real Estate Weekly and CoStar Development, and featuring some of their current multiplex projects. And it was just the idea of looking at strata, multiplexes, more as like, what is the story of governance? And it was that particular project. I really enjoyed it because it humanized it was trying to like humanize the multiplex development experience a little bit more, I think. And when you look back through history and a lot of the fear or anger related to multiplexes, next time that you are getting out your picket sign to protest a multiplex coming to your neighborhood, please think of single mother Katharine and her 4-year-old son with a 90 decibel bus, hydraulics every morning and the exhaust grime on our windows. And think, okay, parking might be a little tighter in our neighborhood, and that might be a slightly more uncomfortable for me, but I can't wait to welcome these new families to our community. We're going to have more kids and more people around, more connection, and we just can't wait to invite these new families to our neighborhood. And I would really like to see that a little bit more. Um, because particularly too with like in the video we talked about, and it's not the first time it's been mentioned recently, this was mentioned at the Missing Middle conference too, but there was a huge backlash and fear for every stage of densification in non-major arterial routes throughout history. So when laneway houses became a thing, and basement suites and monster houses in the 80s and Vancouver specials in the 70s, they were coming into traditionally residential areas, and they were densifying where there'd only been single family housing. And there's been a lot of pushback over the years, but those housing models did take ultimately. So there might be some amendments to multiplex design based on like city and municipal requirements. But to me, this housing style is what makes most sense at this juncture. It doesn't make most sense to continue to stack up super development communities where they're really not needed. This gentle densification is what's needed. And yeah, that was a really fun project. It
It
was
was
good.
cool. I felt two ways about it. I see what you're saying. I also heard them indicate that one of the projects featured was one that would not be approved anymore because Burnaby has since changed its multiplex legislation. And then when I saw the backup view, it was looming over its neighbors, and it wasn't very thoughtful. It was maybe thoughtful for whomever's going to live there, but it wasn't very thoughtful for those who lived right beside it. And it had me wondering, are we doing it right with this gentle diversification, or is there a better way? Should we look at cities around the world for densification models that over the last 100 plus years have have actually worked better than what we're attempting to do for gentle diversification. And it's not saying that it would be fit for any residential neighborhood, but if you do look to Europe, whether you go to Spain or France or even England, there are plenty of versions of densification that are perhaps upon completion, because they were all controversial when they were built,
Always.
much better than what we might be doing right now. And so whether you think about the Haussmann style buildings in Paris, or you think of the row style housing in the UK, um, is our form of separate buildings not
I think of like New York with all the walk-ups and stuff too. The like
brownstones?
narrow,
So
yeah, the
that's a great
brownstones.
example.
Yeah.
Brownstones are great.
So
I live
that
in the
to me, this
West
is like
Coast
what
equivalent of the
multiplex
brownstone.
will become. But so
But
because of a couple of early adopting developers who came up with more boxy or too tall designs. Again, this is the part where I'm like, there'll be some things with the
yeah.
setbacks and they'll snip some regulations, but they're
Mhm.
coming. And for Burnaby to have the short sightedness to say, because of one design or two or even three designs in three neighborhoods where probably that wasn't the smartest pick, anyways, I bet you the architect or someone in that project would have said, are we sure this is the right approach? And then everyone was like, no, 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 make that person be quiet and go away. But I bet you if they replayed that conversation now, they're like, shoot, we probably shouldn't have tempted fate with the municipality and done that design. Pay attention, the rest of you. Don't push the boundaries so far that you make the public outcry so big. Like,
Well,
we know
unfortunately,
when they're pushing it.
we talked about this earlier. People will do what they're legally required to do, and these
They'll push the
people
boundaries.
maximized what they could
Yes.
put onto that space to maximize their returns.
So again, that is one example of an exceptional outlier. Like a lot of the designs I've seen, like they're trying to be thoughtful with the way that even the sight lines are designed for
Right.
the neighborhood. They're trying to be thoughtful with how the patios or yards are adjacent so that there'll be minimal costs to the budget for the shared
Mhm.
strata. Like it would just be like, no, 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 we're going to make sure that we have separate landscaping yard areas so that you only have to deal with your own and you don't have to fight over that, or that you don't have to have budget lines. So there's thoughtful design, but it takes effort. You can't just like use Minecraft to design a block house as high as you can and then click submit to the city of Burnaby. Well, that's not maybe the best idea. And I
But my
probably
son
could
could
have
do
told you
great at
that.
that. I think he could do it.
Same, right? I'm not going to let Nolan do any multiplex designs though, because I
I
know
love
he
the
would do
concept, and
best.
you mentioning brownstones and the equivalent. I think that those are fantastic densification designs.
Yeah.
You're benefiting from a whole bunch of things that multiplexes, especially if they're multiple buildings on the same lot, are not properly addressing, like energy efficiency. When you put them all in a row, they now don't all have all exterior walls. You're nestled up against your neighbors, right? So there's some energy
Well, then
efficiency
you
and some
design them
opulence
so
there.
that they don't have windows that get blocked. So I saw a thing in the news recently where a woman had a building built next to her, and her ground floor window was completely this close to a cinder block wall. Like if there was a fire, she's stuck, right? So like you got like when you design instead of one-offs, like how can we maximize this one thing to make the most money? And instead, how can we thoughtfully integrate this new housing style so that they actually work together and work with the community? That's where it is. But guess what? That process takes more effort up front. And it's a group of people in a market that don't usually like to do that. They want to get it done fast and cheap. So, and I'm
Yeah,
not saying
with
all of them.
realistic
That is
densification.
that's a stereotype. So just
Yeah,
to be clear, lots of good ones out there.
yeah. Stereotypes are fine. They broadly work, right? Uh, Stratification of these things is an ongoing debate. I mean, we're clearly seeing even the regulators come out there and say, here's the language you have to use if it's non-conforming. Is that what we want? Do we want to just blatantly advertise the exception to the rule? Should we change the rules? Should we make sure that they are always applied? There's got to be some sort of point at which that's made. And can we do more to separate large communities from small ones, so that the small ones can benefit from the good aspects of strata without having all of the pain that can come with overregulation.
Or even just more
There's
transparency would be nice at this point too. Um, you know,
lots to be requested there for sure.
yeah, like I feel like we don't need it to be perfect. We don't need to change all the rules, but just a little bit more transparency and education, even a little bit more thought up front. Like right now, the BC government is actually pulling back a lot of transparency and access to public listings and registries and things like that. Grant funding visibility has been pared back on the official websites and things like that. So I'm just like, instead, I'd like to see more transparency. It had been suggested that there even be a strata registry at some point, and we already have that ability with Form Ds, the update of mailing addresses to the LSTA, the Land Title Survey Authority, to put in some more access to information for people who need it.
Yeah, Ontario
Yeah.
has a directory. It's there. It's, I think, imperfect, but it's better than nothing. And I certainly think, again, that does make sense. It makes more sense the bigger the building is. At what point do you have an all-American system where every particular lot can be looked up and the owner information is transparent? Like that's the
Well, you
California
can.
model.
You can do title searches, but it'll cost you a lot of money if you
Right.
wanted to do
That's
all of
just
that for
out
all your
there
neighbors.
on the internet in
Yeah,
America. So you can
that's
look
scary.
that stuff up, which is scary. It's the
Yeah.
ultimate opposite extreme of where we're at. But some transparency, I think, would be fantastic. And I still think that there's a massive number, many thousands of strata communities that have 5 to 25 homes in them that aren't being adequately addressed through traditional property management services. You and I have had Sean from Obsidian come on in the past. He talked about how he's addressing a piece of that market. I certainly think there's a lot of room in that market where advice, support, and input will be very helpful. And I think that is a huge opportunity for groundbreaking as well. But
Well, and for Eli report, together you have the guidance, you have the data. Data is so incredibly, it's indispensable, right? Like if you're curious, I would say as a strata owner, reach out to Eli report and go and take a look at your Eli report for your building if it's available and listed. And it'll just be really interesting. People can question people can question what's in the minutes or how the council's trying to control the narrative. But when you actually go online and see what's publicly available and the story that your building is telling out there without you even realizing it, you might be surprised, I think, as an owner.
it's true. Yeah. And then, if you're really interested, that annual benchmark report does show you those other buildings and what they're spending. That I think it's interesting. Not that many strata council members are digging into it yet, but the opportunity exists. The time will come. I think that there's some angles.
Yeah. Because
Katharine,
we
that's
don't
been
want to go the
fascinating.
way of peace trees, right?
We're not
Nobody
quite
wants to
at
be.
the
No,
post-apocalyptic
we're
stage yet,
not
but
mega city
uh,
one yet. Not
let's
yet.
let's hope that the future does not turn out that way. All right.
That's all I got. Yeah.
Well, we'll
Better
see you all
stop
next time.
there.
Thanks so much. Bye for now.